A lot for the invitation. Thanks a lot, Miquel. Thanks a lot, Anna Maria. Thanks a lot, Magda, because I really like to be here with Magda. The topic of this presentation is about open building design and construction, and this will present you more or less the topics. I'm a very short synthesis of the topics I'm teaching in Mendrisio in my advanced course at the master years. Just to try to get a connection between me and Magda, imagine. Well, we all are very interested in working and in thinking about what's going on in building that is possible to have a change of use during the time. So in my activity, in research activity, I'm studying how to design guidelines for sustainable energy retrofit, restoration and reuse of flexible modern heritage, flexible evolutionary modern heritage, so a specific kind of architecture that I'm deeply investigated. And specifically today, I will talk about open building design construction. That is, which is somehow the state of the art in open building design, matched with the advanced construction system and material state of the art again. So I will try to give you an overview. It's necessarily a short overview, a sort of synthesis, but it's a point of situation about, and I will present you two case studies, Next 21 in Japan, in Osaka, and the next building in Zurich. And they are two case studies, real case studies, existing case studies. One is still ongoing, the Zurich one, about what could it mean today to work with and on the topic of the open building system. So a very, very short introduction to the general topics, because otherwise it's difficult to understand which is the point of situation. First of all, the industrialized prefabricated construction, what does it mean? It means that there was a turning point in the construction history, and mainly during, let's say about around the 50s and the 70s in Europe, in Western countries specifically. And there is a fundamental book, the book by Konrad Wachsmann, Wendepunkt im Bauen. It's a German book, but quite famous, well known. There is even the German, the English, and the Italian translation. I suppose even the French one, but not so totally sure. But anyway, Konrad Wachsmann was a very interesting guy, professor, came from Germany to United States, obviously in the University of Los Angeles, trying to making a sort of point of situation about what does it mean prefabrication, what does it mean designing building that is possible to build with an organized system. Later we will call it an integrated system of design, and with a very, very modular and systematic way of doing. So it's very interesting. Are very interesting in his investigation. And another very important architect who was his assistant in the United States, but he's a Swiss architect, and he was living in Switzerland up to the end of his life. Fritz Haller was his pupil, let's say, and he designed very, very interesting building, once more related to the idea of integrated system design, but able to change during the time. So fixing the sort of base building and allowing the changing of the infill somehow. Another interesting book I suggest you is From Serial to Digital Architecture, edited by the Technische Universität in München, so the Polytechnic School in München. in Germany, and this is a book that is important because in 2001 define a new point of situation related to the how is the situation coming from the, let's say, traditional industrial production to the so-called new tools of production, that is the so-called digital era. So briefly, prefabrication. So what does it mean? A process that which consists in production off-site, this is very important, of the constituent elements of building. Then obviously these elements have to be modular, have to be, somebody says, standardized, and there is a large discussion we could exchange about standard and modular, what does it mean, but this is not the right situation, so maybe one day. But anyway, there is a question about prefabrication. What does it mean? It means that when we want to build a building, we define a process. We try to organize a process. We try to make some order in how to produce the element to build. And the way of producing the building is related to a modular rule with the material, the chosen material, and how this element will be produced. And there is many questions on this topic. And in prefabrication, there are three main families. The closed system in general speaking means, for example, the tunnel system that is so famous in France, famous or bad famous in France, but anyway, the closed system means there is a single way, a solution that somebody says is the best one at the moment, is a chosen solution, and this proposal allows to realize very, very serial and absolutely the same situation in a repetition, infinite repetition, let's say, of one element, a structural element, and the combination of this exactly same element. So inside of the closed world, so only some elements are allowed in that kind of system. You can somehow realize and build the building you are designing or desire. The modular assembly system is a sort of intermediate situation. That is, there is a larger abacus of element, and with this abacus of element, it's possible to realize and obtain a short series of different elements, but inside of the absolutely same rules and same building elements. Third, there are the open system. Open system, I imagine, is the logic on which you are working on, imagining that somebody is giving you a base building, so a sort of infrastructure that is structural too, and all the rest is somehow free. And the idea is that in this case, you have the base building as a structure. So in the reality, we are talking about an infrastructure. And then the infill, so everything that is defining the living space inside, depending from the use, the kind of use and so on, is possible to organize during the time, even with elements that are coming from a different system of construction. So the very big difference in this kind of logic is that it is an open system, meaning with open that you are not obliged in using always the same elements inside of the same system, defined for the same system. So somehow we are talking about some way of doing. Today we could summarize. It's a very, very synthetic, let's say, exposition. But anyway, today we can say that we can build with set logic or kit logic. Set logic means that rules and details are known. So you know how each element has to be exactly in order to achieve the result you want. On another side, there is the kit logic, that is details are unknown. So and details are known, results are not. That is, it's an open system. Open system means that all the elements in the market are known because all the producer give you some catalogs or whatever, but the way of combining and the final result is up to you. It's exactly defined by the project asset. So, which is the fundamental way of doing that in defining and achieving open building system is working in the integrated architectural design line. That is, it's very important that today we learn how to integrate our design, all the elements of our design, in order to obtain the best final result as possible. Masters of architecture were leading with this kind of topic. Specifically, Louis Kahn, who is a marvelous master of modern architecture, was really one of the first and one of the masters in strictly leading with the integration of his design process. And most of the time he collaborated with a great engineer, Louis Commandant, who was really we could say somehow a genius, because he defined in a very specific way the calculation of post-tension structure for bridges and so on. He wrote a lot of manuals, and he was really a great friend of Louis Kahn, and he was fundamental for Kahn in order to obtain the so famous architectural results of Louis Kahn works. So the relation between engineer and architecture in this presentation will be quite present, because in my opinion it's fundamental. I am an architect, I'm not an engineer, but I'm really passionate with engineering topics, exactly because I perfectly agree, I'm convinced, and this is my personal idea, but I'm working on it, to focus out how important is to open a dialogue and to mix information and competencies between architects and engineers, because in the end, the final result is absolutely the same and the aim is absolutely the same. So in this very short slide, the idea is that Louis Kahn was a great architect. So he was leading with all the architectural elements we are used to discuss as architects, such as natural elements, air, natural light, and so on and so on. But at the same time, he was really interested, and he paid a lot of attention in a very professional way in defining all the technical elements that was necessary to insert in his building in order to make them work as better as possible. So the integration of installation and the quality of architecture and natural element was exactly precisely defined by this guy, this master. So integrated architectural design is a way of thinking and is a way of designing architecture. It's a process. So, and inside of this process, if we go further, we can talk about open building system. So, which are the tools? The tools to work on open building system is, first of all, understanding building. And understanding building means try to, for example, buildings are a sort of a collection of different layers, and any layers has its own meaning. The layer of structure, the layer of installation, the layer of finishing, the layer of whatever you foundation, roof, coverings, whatever you want. So the question is how to read the building. And this book is very interesting by my point of view, by Professor Arthur Ruegg, quite famous. He was the full professor in 𝐀𝐝 Zurich in the chair of construction. And for example, this is only one page of this very interesting book. But for example, as exercise to his students, he was asking to learn how to read which are the load-bearing and the not load-bearing elements inside of the building. For example, which are the the elements in the layer of, for example, installation or any other aspect or part of the building. So subdividing the process, subdividing, reorganizing, reading which are the words, which are the letters inside of the text of a building is fundamental in order to understand. And this is the reason why I gave you as a reference a text and not a building. Because I perfectly agree that one of the first questions is learning to read. Absolutely later, so in 1994, Stuart Brand wrote a fantastic book, and he defined this very, very clear question. The question is, a building is a sort of, let's say, organism or object that is most of the time organized, or is possible to be organized in layers. And these layers are, for example, site, structure, skin, service, space plan, staff, and whatever you want. But he was really interested in why he did this kind of research. He did this kind of research because he discovered, making some analysis in the market and in the society, because we have to be even absolutely clear in mind that talking about architecture and talking about design is a question of culture and is a question of society, of social aspect. So this is we are never talking only about technical stuff. We are talking about technical stuff, discussing which is the social result, the cultural result, and so which are the ideas we are sharing, we are proposing, and we are discussing. Usually we are designing in order to improve the existing situation. So the question is how to read the existing situation to be able at least to do nothing worse and possibly something better. So over time, what was a greatest impact on the maintenance cost of a building is not related to the structure, but to the adaptation. And it is the key sentence in Stuart Brand. Stuart Brand today is a consultant for United Nations Office for Housing and so on. So he's a quite important and famous guy. But this is a key question. So this is the reason why I imagine we were invited, me and Magda Maria, in this context, so interesting to me, to discuss which is the relation, which is the meaning of thinking about maintenance of a building during the time, and how to think about a building to be able to be maintained during the time inside of a specific logic. So Magda Maria is working on existing building. I'm trying to give you some indication on designing new building with this kind of approach. So the main topic on my presentation is open building design construction, and specifically evolutionary and reversible architecture. That is even a topic, the main topic of my PhD investigation. So theory and concept, very, very shortly. Reversibility of fault. So reversibility not only as a technical question, once more, but as an aspect of our life, of our way of being, human being, our discussion and exchange of information. So the ability to consider reversibility implies, when observing the final phase of the process, also taking into account the previous phases and vice versa. So when we design a building, we should think about which is the life of the building and what could happen during the life of this building. That's the point. Not only the question of, well, I design a building, I give the building to my client, I'm very happy, maybe I won a prize, and that's it. No, that's only the first phase. That's only the starting point of the building history. On the other side, reversibility of fault, therefore, means thinking two things at a time and no longer one. It is a useful tool to develop the ability to evaluate different alternatives, consider different options, and therefore to be open and receptive to new possibilities. So thinking about architecture as something that is not finished, the day that is ready, but is just starting to live. So what about spazio abitabile and adattabile nel tempo? I wrote it in Italian because to me it's very important to keep this word in Italian, spazio abitabile, inevitable housing space. Adaptable over the time. The best housing proposal will be obtained by adapting over the time all the elements of the project to the different practical, emotional, and relational needs of user. So, talking about architecture is a question of a relation between you as a designer and the people who will live inside of the building. So this is the reason why Giancarlo De Carlo, a super famous architect who was part of Team 10 group and so on, wrote this sentence exactly to focus and underline, which is the importance of obtaining buildings that are able to follow the necessity of people living inside. Then the grammar of fantasy, the suggestion I sent you, I just take out very, very few sentences, just talking, for example, about on La Fantastica. So we are facing a sort of not exactly a new problem, but we are facing a usual problem from a different point of view. So if you're working on a different point of view, we need new tools or at least new ingredients to work on it. So for example, we could make some references to people who were working on the logic of inventing story, of inventing open stories, for example, and so on. Gianni Rodari is quite famous writer for 𝐀𝐝𝐬𝐧𝐬 in Italy, but all over the world. And he wrote this sentence coming from Novalis: if you had a Fantastica as a logica, the art of inventing would be discovered. So inventing is not only a question of logic, but only a question of invention, of discovering something, of interpreting the reality in order to say something that is not exactly the description of the reality. When a child invents a story, it is a creative operation that also has an aesthetic aspect. We are interested in the relation to creativity. So creativity related to making design, so design and architecture, is related to aesthetic aspect, obviously, but it's related to the creativity that we are adding to the design process in order to obtain an interesting and innovating object. And so the movement of feeling affect the mathematical imagination. I really love this expression. Mathematical imagination, because even imagination has its own rules. They are not geometrical rules, they are not numerical rules, but there are rules. So we have to learn how to lead with these topics. Another aspect is about imagination and creativity. As I told you, imagination and creativity are aspects of invention, are aspects of definition of a new proposal that is design and architecture. What about starting with the open building system? A super famous starting point could be or can be the design by Le Corbusier for Plan Obus in Algeria in 1930. And in the bottom, you find the sentence wrote by Kenneth Frenton in the History of Modern Architecture, where he exactly described the fundamental question of this design by Le Corbusier. The idea was to design an infrastructure, and inside of this infrastructure, give the opportunity to people to realize their own house following some rules given from the infrastructure and feeling free, choosing and defining some other aspect of the final result. An architect who studied deeply this question was John Bracken, who is a Dutch architect, who moved to United States for quite a long period, and he was the director of the school in the MIT in Boston, the School of Architecture in MIT in Boston. He wrote some books very interesting, and the fundamental one, the first one, is the book Support, an Alternative to Mass Housing, where he expressed his theory about support and infill. So defining what I was saying, a new point of view, not a totally new invention. We're not inventing totally architecture, but we are just trying to looking for new ideas and a way of doing architecture. And in this case, there was a hierarchy, very clear hierarchy, the idea of defining a clear hierarchy between what is support, that in his theory was considered even something that has the collective responsibility. Today we would say the urban context relation, and something that is connected to, and the infill that is related to the individual responsibility. That is something that is today we would say something related to the comfort aspect of housing unit. These are some elements coming from this research in TU and Eindhoven, and then in MIT in Boston. So 2 case studies related to this topic of inventing open stories. So what does it mean, open stories? The open stories that is unfinished or with multiple endings. So that open building are buildings that are not finished, but that is possible to change them or have some change during the time. So obviously something that is changeable is reversible, as I told you, because in terms of thinking of social science, changing is intended as reversibility. So reversible is something which can go back to the initial state of condition. When children discovered the logical conclusion, they introduced the mathematical element of reversibility into the free game of imagination. So once more, there is a question of imagination, but there is even a question of method and tools and how to lead with this. So the first case study is the Next 21 building in Osaka. It's quite famous. That is really quite well published. Unfortunately, the only monography exists is in Japanese, still in Japanese, no translation. So I had some problems in working on this book, but in the end I got it. And so here it is. This is the design, the structural design of the support. So we are talking about support infill architecture as defined by John Bracken. So support infill, this is the main structure. This is fixed. It never changes during the time, during all the life of the building. And then some modular thinking about the traditional modular square grid and the tatami logic. Obviously, we are in Japan, so tatami is a fundamental question. And here there is the first question about open building. Open building is base building, is an infrastructure related to the integrated process. So when we talk about integration, we talk about defining where are the different elements composing a building, a finished building. So in this case, all the installation. So how to organize the element. There are thousands of ways of organizing. So there is not the best way of doing. That is very important to understand which are the different way of doing. To my students, as exercise, I give a lot of case studies. In the first exercise, they have 2 exercises. The first exercise is case studies. I give them just to understand which are these logic: base building, infill, and the integrational logic. And the infill in Next 21 is exactly represented in this axonometry. And it's very simple to understand that the base building is the structure. The integration elements are the installation and so on. All the other elements, absolutely all the other elements, partition, facade, any element is infill. That is, you can move, change, and reorganize during the time. And then in the reality, it happens. As you see in this picture, it's quite dense. I'm sorry, but it's partially in Japanese. So, but anyway, what is important here to understand is that during the time, this building really was adapted. Was adapted inside. Was the unit were designed by 14 different architects. So one base building, 14 architects, one open system of infill solution, and possible variation during the time. And as you see in the picture on the bottom left, right, this is exactly the same corner of the building during the first period of the building and 2 years ago when I visited the building. So this building really changed because all the building is modular, is prefabricated, and is possible, is reversible. That is possible to demount and interchange the interior spaces and the exterior spaces. Then this building is a prototype, is a sort of machine. The owner of the building is 𝐬𝐲𝐬𝐭𝐫𝐻 company. So this is the main company for gas in the central area of Japan. And this building was a prototype in order to test new technologies for energy, testing the energy consumption on new technology. And then when all these technologies were ready, sending this new technology to the market. So it's a sort of open laboratory that is still ongoing. And finally, this is not only a sort of technical machine, but this is even a absolutely important and defined urban element. So this is a building that in the interior of the general geometry, there is a garden that in Osaka, a garden is a sort of marvelous thing. It is more or less impossible to find green area in the central Osaka, in the central city of Osaka. But in this case, because it was a really huge group of people working in this project, Uchida was the leader of the process, then the Tokyo University, then the Osaka Gas Company with his own technical offices. And in the end, they decided to design a garden on the ground floor and on the roof. And this garden today is a biological corridor through the city of Osaka. So something really incredible. Imagine that inside of Osaka, that is a totally gray city, this exists a green corridor that really works, and people living there has his own gardens and places where make some private cultivation. The second case study is next building in ETH. This is an ongoing investigation, it's still ongoing. The investigation will end in 2035. So we are more or less in the middle of the work. And so here you see all the steps at the moment. And the proponents are ENPA and EAVAG. So two group of investigation, semi-private, semi-public, so private and public, that are the most important investigation group in Switzerland concerning the development of new technologies and structural analysis and so on. So next is a laboratory. So it's a building built as to be a laboratory. These are all the investigation ongoing in this moment, all the investigation. I will present you specifically just one. And this is the building itself. So as you see, we can describe the building once more a base building, so a structure that is just supporting, and all the elements are coming ready from outside, so they are off-site prefabricated in the final position. So the building is totally prefabricated with modular element in an open system. So the elemental system is coming directly from this is, for example, the plan of a unit, the bottom left, and the typical section. And here is the way of building. So the infrastructure is done, is there, is ready, and all the housing unit, because this is a student housing and laboratories in the same building. So some investigators, some students are living inside of the building, testing all the elements are there, because so the students are themselves living, and through the living of the spaces, they are testing the machine and testing any object inside. So the building is totally outside, built outside, prefabricated outside. The modules are coming from the factory. They are setting on site. They are finished. And as you see on the right side, all the installation are totally integrated. So this is a totally integrated design in order to obtain an open design system. As you see, all the elements, there are no elements built on site. All the elements are coming from outside, prefabricated in the housing layer, while in the logic is exactly the opposite, and the logic is the on-site robotic prefabrication. So this is a laboratory, I repeat. So being a laboratory, they are testing many different opportunity and solutions. So on one side, they are testing how to prefabricate everything and adding the prefabricated units in the final building. On the other side, this is a test laboratory, the most advanced testing laboratory. I could say surely in Switzerland, maybe in Europe, because there are only other two in the world at the moment for robotic fabrication in terms of robotic printing and so on, but super high sophisticated elements. So there are robotic machines that are producing architectural elements through innovative technologies. This is the final result that, as you see, is never finished. It's an ongoing process. They are building this the second floor at the moment, but when they finish the second floor, they start probably demounting another part that is already exhausted, substituting with another one, and so on and so on. So, which are the fundamental questions of my presentation? The potential advantages of innovation, industrialized open building, support infill strategies, or plug-in. Plug-in means to prefabricate outside and bring finished element or semi-finished element to the final place. So open system final objective is to separate the building into transportable elements, interchangeability of pieces, adaptation over time, schedule the maintenance. So the maintenance is an element of design. It's not a question that, oh my God, now what I do? There are some problems in any kind of maintenance problem, but I have an idea of how to lead with it. And the approach is organizing the building in a supporting infrastructure, in infill element and in finishes elements too. So in the end, elements can be chosen from different catalogs and providers. So it's an open process. Architectural space flexibility in prefabrication. So if the cost of building is divided in, obviously, as all the manual says, in production cost, operating maintenance cost, demolition and recycling cost, and the traditional serial fabrication avoid variation in structure and finishing. So in prefabrication, I can change something. The result is flexibility in architecture. So through prefabrication, I can gain some flexibility. in open building system, again, a wider flexibility. So innovation basic concept, this is my conclusion. Innovation, what is innovation? And I really like to present here a sentence by an engineer. Yves Wynand is an engineer in EPF in Lausanne, and he say the architect must be generalist. The combination of humanistic and technical parameters can determine the construction of the quality of architecture. So I am deeply concerned and deeply interested in the relation between engineer thinking and architectural thinking, because I'm perfectly convinced, even because of my experiences in my starting experiences in my life, collaborating with a lot of well-known architects, where exactly I understood, and my job was exactly mixing and making the relation between the architectural question and the engineer question in order to obtain the best result as possible. And this book by David Epstein is very interesting, related to what does it mean generalistic thinking and behavior. So just to open the discussion, we just some flashes I want to give you to think about. There is in France culture. There was an incredible guy, Jonas Friedman, who designed and wrote the book Mobile Architecture, and opened some discussion on open system. Cedric Price in England, in London, even wrote and opened very interesting discussion. But then there are some writers, for example, Roland Barthes with a lot of discussed fragment. That is exactly the idea of organizing a test with the fragments. So the question of relation between parts that makes an incredible sense, that is totally different from a traditional way of telling a story. So how to invent, how to open stories. If you read Love's discussed fragment, somehow you can imagine different love stories, and that's quite fun. And in the end, Italo Calvino Norton lecture or Lezioni Americane on 6 memos for the next millennium, because he defined some open question in present culture. And I think that these open questions are still absolutely present and alive. So finally, further industrial revolution. We are living the third industrial revolution, and third industrial revolution means that is very interesting. That in the end, well, I can't read everything, but the fundamental question is that the new frontier in discussing is interchange, making collaboration and open discussion between us. I mean, between us as designer, between us as people who are living in the space, between us as people who are living in urban spaces. And so open a discussion about what does it mean, for example, interface with the existing building or with a new building. And the new way we have is collaborating and participating to this kind of processes. So it's very interesting that all the innovation in production, such as computer-assisted industrial production technique, automotive, aerospace industries, BIM process, the BIM, building information modeling processes, the robotic construction, the customization in construction, and so on. All of them are pointing to adapting the final result to the user desire or dreams. And the question is how to turn architecture more open than before. So it's not exactly different. It's just more open, more flexible, more at disposal to accept, for example, new programs. What does it mean to reuse an existing building? Just to give you an idea in what could we do and should we do, and I hope we will do, at least in part. This is a sample of what does it mean innovation. Innovation means that in the 80s, we were using, I imagine that the students won't remember this, but we were using floppy disk. The capacity was 5.5 megabytes. Then there were the VHS tape for video recording, not only for data. Then the floppy disk that were recording video and data up to 3.5, so an incredible dimension and quantity. Then the CD-ROM technique, then the USB flash drive, and today the cloud. So today it's not physical, but anyway, it's a data storage. So the idea of data storage is completely changing. And the question of storaging data is exactly the same, but in how to do it is totally changing. So this is the question. Housing is always the same question. We need to live in building. We want to live in building. We need to live in buildings. But the question is how? Do we want to live there and how the buildings are? So in the end, tool and processes. Technology transfer, we have to be involved in technology transfer, multidisciplinary researches, and interdisciplinary researches. So it's very important to learn how to speak with, to exchange our language with other specialized languages. We have to learn how to talk with engineers. We have to learn how to talk with biologists or whatever in order to exchange information, to present our question and to understand their questions or answer or inputs. And these three way of doing are all fundamental and present. So today trends are the idea of replacing the human labor by technology in order to make work less risky and healthier. Not in order to replace the architect or the person who is thinking or the person who is living in the spaces. But the question is to trying to avoiding as far as possible bullshit jobs. This really incredible and in my opinion, interesting definition. Not so, let's say, elegant, but anyway, really efficient. So bullshit jobs are all that kind of jobs that in the reality is possible not to do in order to obtain some kind of situation. And for example, in designing process, there are really a lot of bullshit jobs that we could discuss about. Off-site production, in order to obtain an higher building performance, better general quality, smart sustainability in terms of material, life cycle process, and so on and so on. Limited sources, so taking care of the sources at our disposal. So what does it really mean sustainability? What does it really mean eco-building? What does it really mean energy efficiency, modularity, recycling tool, and so on? And so this is the time that is opening the new scenario for robotic customization and robotic construction. And this is still a totally open question. We are discussing and studying on this topic, but at the moment, there are no exact, precise and defined solutions. So in general, permanent superstructure, temporary position of site 3D prefabricated, innovative material, and thinking about and taking in care the life cycle assessment of the entire process of the building that is not only the design process, the building process, but including the life and the end of the life of the building itself. So finally, there is nothing mysterious in the process of innovation. What is needed is just courage, care, and attention to detail, and above all, belief and getting started. So thanks a lot for your attention and all the best for your work. This is just a very, very short presentation. I'm sorry about it. I made a lot of jumps. I know it, but it was necessary. Thanks a lot.
I will to read my lesson. I'm going to talk about architectural reuse strategies from the point of view of abandonment as an opportunity. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Ara irà enrere.
Magda, em sembla que has de treure el mòdul pantalla completa i veure-ho tu normal i així podràs avançar les slides, perquè si no ara estem a la primera encara.
Hola.
Ara estem a la 3.
Doncs hauríem d'estar a la 2. Oh, com vaig enrere? Sí. Sorry. Per anar enrere...
Jo diria que la fletxeta que tens a mà dalt a l'esquerra, hi ha una fletxeta que puja cap amunt, et deu portar a la 2 i la de la dreta et deu portar a la 4. A la teva pantalla, sota d'obrir, veus les fletxetes que hi ha al costat del número de pàgina?
És que no veig el número de pàgina.
Vols enviar-nos-ho i que ho passem nosaltres?
Espera, un segon. Espera't un segon. Espera, torno a entrar. Ara veig les fletxetes. Vale. Compartir pantalla.
Jo crec que sense fer el modo plen ecran...
Vale, ara ho veig, Anna Maria. Sí, vale, ok. Com es veu?
De moment encara està negre.
No. Ostres, doncs...
Sí, però suposo que ara arribarà, no? I only see black from the moment. Do you see other things, Carlo, or...
I see the presentation, yeah.
You see the presentation? Okay,
then
go on.
No. Now the... Okay, now I see the presentation.
I don't, but I think it's maybe some...
And the students?
Connection problem. Do the students see everything also?
Yes. Really good.
Okay, perfect. Then go on, Magda.
No, Anna Maria, let's go salir y volver a entrar. Os espero. O veis la presentación.
No, nosaltres no la veiem, però...
Pues, sortiu i torneu a entrar.
Però és que com som a l'hostes, si sortim... Espera, vaig a intentar connectar-me amb el meu ordinador i així en tenim dos i a veure què... Però comença, Feu. You can begin and we will try to do something to...
Okay, Carlo, can you see the screen?
Yes, the screen, it's okay. Everything is okay.
Okay. Done. Well, I said I'm going to talk about architectural reuse strategies from the point of view of abandonment as an opportunity. Usually, society tends to value negatively abandoned, underuses, or unuses architectures. You see them in certain areas of our geography and in various sectors of our cities that are in many cases sense of marginality and conflict. However, just because they are old or abandoned does not mean they are useless or dead. In fact, their lives can be even longer than some new buildings. Therefore, before tearing them down, we should think how to take advantage of them. There are photographers who specialize in immortalizing these buildings as if they were apocalyptic ruins, like you can see in the first picture. Others, like Bruno Fert, with the image Les Absents, captures magical moments that strike our conscience. They show us how just with temporary traces of human presence, these semi-demolished spaces can become habitable. See this table prepared with surprising delicacy in the middle of a ruined palace, illuminated by a ray of light. The main problem that we face to solve the degradation of the architectural heritage, either from historical or more recent times, is the economic one. On the other hand, administrative large buildings with very generous heights, highly solid materials, floors with high structural resistance, and big windows. It is about enhancing these intrinsic qualities, their material, spatial, organizational, and perceptual characteristics. However, history is full of examples of buildings whose structures have hosted several uses throughout their life and have maintained their attributes despite having changed their functions. If we analyze them, we notice that one of the keys to keeping them has been the choice of a type of activities that have fitted well with the characteristics of the spaces. The new uses, therefore, have been adapted to the existing architectures. The example on the screen is very significant. A former Hof in Baden-Baden, Germany, from the early 19th century, turned into a hotel. The apartments and common areas characteristics fit perfectly with the requirements of the new hotel program. In Barcelona, there are buildings that from immemorial times have changed their use several times without modifying their spatial, morphological, structural, and material conditions. In a recent study on the reuse of buildings in Barcelona, made by our research group, Habitar research group of the Polytechnic University of Catalonia, and published under the title Atlas of Architectural Exploitation, a critical study of reused buildings in Barcelona, we have identified 1,463 cases of buildings that from the first century to the present have changed their use once or more times. One of them is the building of the Drassanes, the shipyards built in the 13th century that housed from the 17th century several military and hospital functions before becoming the Maritime Museum from 1936 to the present. The preservation of the unidirectional naves to today, with their gable roofs supported by wide semicircular arches on thick stone pillars, underlines the functional, structural, and constructive rationality of a spatial organization that has been capable of hosting very different programs. Another example is the large water tank in the 𝐬𝐻𝑳𝐬𝐿 Park. This building, conceived as a traditional structure of thick brick pillars with 14-meter high parallel arches and barrel vaults, had to withstand the enormous loads of the water tank located on its roof. Since 1888, it was transformed 6 times into a hospital, a fire department store, a locker room, a police department, and a justice file. Finally, in 1999, it became the Universitat Pompeu Fabra's library. The power of these large spaces, structures, generally built with good quality materials, survive any distribution or smaller inner partition, thus easily allowing their recovery. They are architectures of a great clarity and neutrality, versatile and multi-purpose, enabling segmentations or extensions without traumas. Rafael Moneo, in his article, The Life of Buildings, asserts that the buildings that stand the test of time are those that permit their adaptation to strongly changing realities without losing their morphological identity. The second strategy, diversifying, consists of distributing the new activities in the different parts of a large build complex in an atomized way. Diversification operates on constructions of a certain size, which on many occasions have represented a significant difficulty for their reuse, focused on a single activity. Assigning them heterogeneous functions facilitates their reuse. In this way, the compounds, originally closed, have to open the doors for users to access the entities distributed between. A paradigmatic case is the Hospital of the Santa Creu, which dates from 1401. It currently houses the Library of Catalonia, the Arts and Crafts Massana School, the District Library, the Royal Academy of Pharmacy, and other city offices and exhibition centers. The access to the complex is through a pedestrian walkway from Carmen Street and under a wide covered part of the Hospital Street. All this has generated an interior open space formed by a string private courtyards and gardens. This develops a more porous relationship with the city, a necessary tactic to keep these large complexes standing and at the same time regenerate the essential link between architecture and urban space, thus offering new areas of social relations that contribute to their proper functioning. The opposite of the diversifying strategy is specializing, and it is applicable to scattered sets of buildings. Through the unification of their functions, these architectures are revitalized cohesively by a program that groups them in a network with a single activity. One example will be the discontinuous hotels. The Sextantio Hotel is in fact an entire 16th century village. Rather than a simple building in the Abruzzi mountain village of Santo Stefano di Cessaneo, this hotel integrates 29 contemporary hotel rooms into the village, distributing them among several houses and buildings. The concept of the albergo diffuso implies that for certain historical sites, urban planning and architecture should not simply serve their final purpose, but should first and foremost respect the local heritage and character, and demonstrates that a hotel can function perfectly in a discontinuous way, thus recovering all the houses in abandoned village. The recovering of a historic building may use the existing structures as a basis to support new intervention. In this way, the design project adds other layers that overlap but complement the existing, including and even enhancing it through the new intervention. This complementing process results in a hybrid body in which the historical body and the aided structures behave as protagonists of a reconciliation rather than as strangers who look at each other with distrust. There are examples of colossal buildings that have seen their original structures supplemented to accommodate new functions. The case of the city of Arles in France is a good example. An ancient Roman amphitheater whose stone supporting walls served also as a defensive wall to the city during the Middle Age. Another more recent example of this way of operating will be the Vienna Gazoometers converted into homes by several of architects' teams, including Jan Nouvel's. The thick cylindrical brick walls become the exterior facade of some houses that lean on them and radially grow inwards. Or in an opposite way, the cylindrical reinforced concrete structure of some old silos in Copenhagen operate as central nucleus to support some lightweight cantilevered structures that build the rooms of a nursing homes. In both cases, the design projects demonstrate the will to reconcile the morphological and constructive logic of the historical bodies with the introduction of new programs and consequently of new forms. Continuing, optimizing the existing as a strategic starting point implies the rejection of the idea of starting from scratch. It forces you to think about the design in terms of process. An architectural design project of today should consist of continuing something that already exists. This means a temporary reset and awareness that we are linked in the life's chain of the buildings in which we operate, and a good dose of humility that leads us to recognize that before us, others already worked in these spaces. Moreover, that after us, others will continue to do so. The drawing on the screen is especially significant because the architect Fernando Távora explains through it how he places his design project at a certain moment of the long life of this complex history. It begins with a small basilica in the 16th century. It continues with a monastery that expands, and in the 18th century hosts an university of theology, until in the 20th century becomes a private home and now in a posada. The design criteria described by Távora in his project of 1985 are to contribute to the continuation of the building's already long life, preserving and reaffirming its most significant spaces and creating new ones, such the semi-depressed wing open to the landscape in a semi-camouflage way that resolve the new program conditions. In an exercise of humility and realism, Távora affirms that his intervention is one more over a long chain of 11 centuries. The design preserves the past and projects itself into the future with the certainty that other centuries will come, and with them more transformations. Revalue. Recognizing the value of all structures is something that should be better thought in architecture schools. Maintaining the patina of time, making visible the history contained in the buildings, is a crucial issue in recycled architectures. 𝐀𝐝𝐯𝐻 claims that a carefully planned new building does not reach the character and quality of a reused building. The revaluation of architecture takes also into account the potential of the anonymous character of certain domestic architectures. This is why the case of the Hexe house in the state of Hessen, Germany, is so interesting. It is an anonymous two-floor house built of stone and gables, topped by a gable roof, renovated by Allison and Peter Smithson between 1985 and 22. At the request of the client, 𝐬𝐻𝐳, the design project was transformed into a process with successive interventions that over the time revalued the initial project. The house ended up becoming the support of a series of actions and activities, crossroads that consolidated over time in every direction, in its surroundings, but also in its interiors, thus tanking on a never imagined life and seeing its existence revitalized. Another great example of revaluation is the old stables renovation by Lacaton Basal that turned them into the Architekturzentrums cafeteria. The structure and the vaulted base remained intact, and the intervention did not affect more than some interior walls. On the other hand, some tiles covering the walls tiles evoke the Oriental architecture so closely related to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This simple operation enhanced a dull space, giving it brightness, light, and personality. A recent case, the use of all structures as a container for exquisite objects is a strategy to revalue them. The container acquires visibility as the background of the work of art, and the work of art benefits from it by enhancing its exquisiteness and perfection. A recent case is that of this film theater in the city of Maó on the island of Menorca. Despite it is abandoned, the presence of an abstract painting exhibition enhances the space, dignifies it, and demonstrates its ability to host other programs than the original functions of the building. The interior reveals its original structure that integrates the witness large canvases, creating an exceptional dialogue. Equipping. The simple installation of an accessory or underused building acts as an activator for new uses. This is what Richard Sennett in his book, The Craftsman, defines as dynamic repair. A dynamic repair starts from an object that needs to be fixed. With this, the object improves its qualities and even offers more services than in its original condition before its reparation. Rainer Banham also alludes to this with the idea of incorporating an outboard motor that allows to convert almost any object into a boat capable of navigating. We could also compare it to the operations of incorporating elevators or access walkways to buildings that were missing these devices. In the Reina Sofia Center in Madrid, Jean Nouvel pioneered 30 years ago installing elevators on the main facade in the form of glass towers. The objective was to give direct access from the square to all the floors of the 20th century-old San Carlos Hospital to turn it into an art center. In some other former warehouses or factories, now converted into homes, a system of balconies or light walkways allow direct access, complementing the exterior elevators. The functional ambiguity of these elements between a distribution platform and a terrace makes them places with an interesting habitability potential. This is the case of some old warehouses in London converted into apartments by the architects Bush and Henley in 1999. Another example from several decades ago, but which illustrates this idea very well, is the renovation carried out by the Milanese architects B.B. Peiro in an old Italian villa. They found a large palace home with an Italian layout, that is, with interconnected rooms without a distribution corridor. They then mounted a light wooden walkway on the facade that gave independent access to each of the rooms. The operation, similar to the assembly of a scaffolding, separated the walkway from the facade and connected the doorways by means of a small bridge. In addition, the light structure was extended at one end to become a midpoint open to the landscape. Re-editing or reformulate. Another strategy to take advantage of inhospitable spaces to inhabit them is to reformulate normatively and qualitatively the parameters and requirements of habitability. Antonello de Messina painting, St. Jerome in his studio, reflects a wonderful case of man's adaptation to a hostile spatial and climatic environment. St. Jerome builds a comfortable and relatively isolated shelter within another large palace space without forcing to change the comfort conditions of the entire environment. It maintains its characteristics untouched, demonstrating that the juxtaposition of a large and altered space with a small equipped area is possible. We can achieve, St. Jerome demonstrates that we can achieve the occupation of space and reach decent living conditions with other strategies by incorporating devices that guarantee the habitability of basic spaces, leaving the rest as semi-heated spaces, or enabling a part of the set, leaving the rest simple as a future reserve of space. An example of this would be the lofts. In the domestic history of the 20th century, lofts have shown that it is possible to rethink the way of inhabiting a space when the starting conditions are not those of a conventional home. Alan Wexler's artistic installations, for example, use strategies similar to lofts, colonizing the center with a furniture object that concentrates all the elements of furniture and household items. The container house is made of 4 mobile closets that display all domestic activities in their immediate surroundings. Thus, the rest of the space remains intact as in the painting of St. Jerome, showing that the comfort conditions do not have to be uniform throughout the interior space. In these cases, one of the important issues to review is the reformulation of some habitability parameters different from the current ones to affect more the nearest comfort rather than obliging to condition the entire volume of air in a homogeneous way. For this, it is necessary to reformulate the regulations by classifying buildings as old cars. They do not have to strictly comply with the regulations for new buildings, such as accessibility, thermal conditioning, ventilation, insulation, etc. This will greatly facilitate their recovery. Coexistence. There are large historical buildings whose volume allows the simultaneous coexistence of uses. They are architectures with large spans and very high ceilings that very decently support several functions at the same time. A paradigmatic case is that of the Milan Cathedral. In 2010, on the celebration of the 5th centenary of the city's patron, Saint Carlo Borromeo, they decided to install the exhibition that illustrated the saint's lives episodes inside the Duomo. Instead of building a new museum, large tapestries and large paintings hung from light structures held between the pilasters of the great central nave of the cathedral, turning it into a large exhibition hall, allowing at the same time the simultaneous celebration of the liturgy. Alternation. Reuse strategies must also have a high response to contingency. The capacity to embrace the unforeseen, which means a not planned way of using things. Examples of these that occur periodically in the cities are sports centers and churches that alternate sports or liturgy with concerts, concert halls, gyms or sports centers that host dinners or official events, Gothic naves that are periodically transformed into community dining rooms, such as the Gothic Church of Saints Just in Pastor that every year in Barcelona removes its benches to install long tables exquisitely arranged to accommodate hundreds of people without resources and celebrate a great meal on the Christmas day. The cases arising from the COVID pandemic are a clear example that architecture can alternate its uses to provide service if necessary to extreme situations. Sports centers have temporarily become field hospitals. Stadiums, museums, and universities have become vaccination centers. The courtyards of palaces, castles, or public squares, orchestras for various shows. All of them have demonstrated their ability to adapt, easily modifying their attributions and subordinating their functioning to social distance, hygienic measures, and ventilation conditions. The COVID pandemic has only reaffirmed some of the strategies that we had proposed in advance through our research. It was shown that architecture is much more versatile and offers many more functional responses that it is usually attributed, and that the phrase of the modern movement that affirms form follows function is absolutely reductionist. We could conclude that unused buildings, whether they are heritage or not, must question their attributions by eliminating all those adjectives that reduce them to certain competencies and thus be viewed not as a problem, but as an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magda. I propose that we open the debate right now, not with no pause, if it's okay for everybody. Miquel, you want to say something?
Ça va bien que vous allumez, maintenant qu'on va discuter, que vous allumez toutes les caméras, parce que comme ça fait moins bizarre de discuter avec un carré noir, si ça ne vous dérange pas.
Super, merci. Thanks. So, to start this discussion, do we have any questions? Spontaneous questions first. They can be posed both orally, so you can turn on your micros, or you can just put them by written. We can read them if you want to. No problem with that. Someone wants to just write down.
Pas tous en même temps, hein, sinon on va stresser.
Alors, je pense qu'il est un... Oui.
On ne vous entend pas bien.
Yes, it's Benjamin.
Oui, Benjamin, allez-y.
Là, c'est bon, vous m'entendez bien?
Oui, on vous entend.
It's for Magda Maria, a question, because she showed in the beginning of her presentation like un coquillage, je ne sais pas comment traduire ça. C'est un mollusque dans un coquillage et le titre c'était It was adaptative with the I don't know how to translate. It was je voudrais juste traduire un coquillage, s'il vous plaît.
Shell.
C'est quoi?
A shell. Shell. Comme la marque Shell.
Okay.
S-H-E-L-L.
Magda Maria. Okay. You were showing a shell, and do you take your inspiration for adaptative architecture from the nature, well, from the elements of the nature?
Yes, well, I found that this animal, the hermit crow, that is the natural example for our ideology to reuse the space. The hermit crow is an animal that adapts its body to abandoned shells. When it grow up, it change his shell, and we think that these strategies of the strategy of this animal is very similar or must be very similar than an optimistic strategies to reuse a building. The building, like the shell, make the same, rest the same, and the activity moves. No, the building change the activities, move the activities. The shell, like the building, must rest for this reason, for the embodied energy, for preserve the land, for memory, history, etc.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello. So I think, Magda, your image is very interesting because common use or common thought of building, we think that buildings must fit our functions. Like what you said, form follows function. And when function changes, we decide to change the form. So your approach is completely opposite, and you're insinuating that maybe maintaining the form and changing the way we use the space is interesting. And I think that this is a very different way of looking at things from what we were doing all the 20th century long. We destroyed a lot of things because they were not fitting what we thought they would be best. And this is something we're trying to do or propose to our students, to say that we do not need to transform a building to fit common or commercial typologies of apartments with two small rooms with a bigger two small bedrooms and then a bigger shared space for eating, dining, and sharing space with family, and then compulsory having just two toilets and everything fitting exactly the same surfaces. We can live otherwise with maybe a bit more of space, less conventional, but with more quality. And I think your examples were very interesting all around that. Benjamin, this is the question of Bernard Lermite. Bernard Lermite does not try to change or to produce a shell that fits his body. He changes himself to adapt to the shell he finds. So do you think, this is a debate, not only for Magda, but for the students, do you think this is possible in today's economic way of looking at things?
See, for me, in the 21st century, we need to preserve the environment. It's the first priority, and the building construction spent a lot of CO2, carbon, oxygens, emissions for new buildings, but for derived for destruction these buildings too. And the history I try to explain demonstrates that to 19th century was very intelligent, but our fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers made like the hermit crow, and use the spaces and didn't transform the spaces when they didn't need. But the 20th century, the industrialization, the liberal economy need more and more spent resources, money, land, etc., materials, etc., and all the system is built so. But now the world need change these strategies, and we observe the ancient strategies, but all the cases that intend to coincide the morphologic, structural, material, environment conditions with the needs of the people. This is the secret. When we have abandoned building, we analyze this, and we intend to coincide of needs that can conceal the space with the function. And the history demonstrates that the pre-established objective of the buildings are false, because the buildings are changing. There are a lot of buildings that are changing its functions more or more a lot of times. Sorry, my English is very bad.
Our English is not working very well either. So I have one question, Magda, in this sense. I think your explanation is very clear, and this is due to the conditions of production and of the abundance of this 20th century, because we were rich in energy, we were rich in materials. We thought we could destroy and redo what would fit our new needs. But of course, when you do not have these conditions of energy and material any longer, you have no choice but recuperating. And when you have no choice, you find the ideas that help you do that, even if you thought they were not possible. You know, that during the 20th century, we thought it was not possible to readapt. And when you have no choice, you need to do that. But I have one question. Don't you think that in order to make it a positive readaptative use, something that is interesting, you need to not only detach from established use, but also be more generous about space? Meaning, if your apartment needs to be 45 square meters, and you need to readapt a building, plus do not make bigger than that, it's very complicated to readapt and to find these adaptations and find this use if you are obliged to keep in 45 square meters. Don't you think that this is a real practical problem in rehabilitating and applying all the strategies you were describing?
The problem is the tools, the official tools, but the official tools are thinking about the life conditions, but there are strategies that official tools can change, like the old cars. the old cars have another tools. And I think that old buildings can have another tools. We in our country, in Spain, we have thousands and thousands of abandoned buildings, and thousand square meters empty, and the thousand people that don't have a home. And when we reuse these square meters in another order of tools, we can inhabit like Saint Jerome, or like the ancient lofts that the climatic conditions are in one little room, and the rest of the space is semi-climatic space. And the quality of these spaces is very different than the smaller apartments for poor people. And we have these spaces. The banks, etc., have millions of square meters empty. It's a big strategy, and I think a city strategy. There are in Spain some cities like in País Vasco, Bilbao, for instance, that have changed its tools, its normative tools in living material, and open the tools, open the window, permit other uses. Very interesting, no restrictive. I think it is the secret to change the tools, to change the normative.
May I say something? Well, first of all, thanks a lot, Magda, because it's always a pleasure to hear your about your research. Two questions. One is an experience I'm running in Switzerland, where the rules are absolutely square. Well, as I present in another occasion when we met the first time in Rennes, what we are doing in Switzerland about recovering existing building, when the existing building has an interest in terms of architecture, or in interest in itself as a building that has a memory for the city or something similar. The question at the moment for us, the strongest tool we have in our hand as designer is to meet the politicians and the technicians who want to control the quality of the buildings, and to demonstrate the history, the value of the building. And in terms of energy, we make a lot of investigation, physical, technical, and scientific investigation in terms of energy and in terms of energy consumption, demonstrating that exactly what you were saying, it is possible to use the same building as it is, not reaching the best performance possible, but a possible performance possible, matching the quality of the building, the value of the building, and the new use. And in some cases, for example, at the moment, I'm following as a consultant the renovation of a post office in the north of super north of Ticino, so in a super cold place. And exactly the idea is to organize something as San Geronimo's office. So because the idea is a small building for the university, for students go there and make some workshop. And the question is, or they demolish the post and they build a new building, or they use the post as itself and it doesn't work, or they keep the building and they save the building and restore the building, so maintain the history, even because it's a quite famous, important building by Rino Tammi, that is a famous architect in Ticino. And what have to be really, really performative is another object exactly inside, as the Wechsler proposal you show. That is, in my opinion, a possible solution. I mean, but the question here is once more to learn how to read the layers in the building, how to learn what we can keep, because its meaning, its functioning, even a technical point of view, is that one. So to understand which is the meaning of the existence, and then to turn it possible or not to use exactly as it is. But imagine, and we had some discussion with the Office of Monument in Switzerland, and at the beginning they said, well, it's impossible, you can't do it. And now they accepted it. They said, well, okay, you're right, because it's absolutely obvious that we keep both two things instead of one. As I said before, we have to learn and think in two things at the same time and not only one at the same time. So thinking about the existing building, the value, and the new program, and try to solve both the situation and not only one of the two and the best situation. Right, you have to be even really much more calm in designing. I mean, keeping relation with the existing, be honest with the existing situation, and just to say, well, let's do the best as possible, but maybe not the maximum, okay, but that is the best possible in this situation. I want to keep the existing building. I want to be possible, students go there and making their workshop. So this is absolutely possible. The other situation is about the Lacaton-Vassal intervention in Paris for the very, very famous tower, where they add a piece of building, even answering to Anna Maria, because I perfectly agree with you that it's very important to understand which is the logic to turn your proposal possible in terms of architecture, in terms of engineering, and in terms of market. And the Lacaton proposal was where I add some value to the existing building, but market value, you know, surface. Selling surface, because well, we are professional, you know. It's sometimes the client comes and say, well, okay, I want more surface, I don't mind absolutely at all about the building. And when they came to me discussing for the post office, was exactly the same. We want a workshop building, don't mind about the existing building. But we said, well, but this is a Rino Tammi building, so we can't demolish it. And they said, well, okay, but we bought it just because we want to make workshops. And we said, okay, we study a solution. Don't worry, it's possible. It's absolutely possible. So related to the students, this is really, really important. To be fundamentalistic is not so interesting most of the time. It's much more interesting to be realistic and to try to read really which is the incredible value is around us, and which are the reason why such kind of situation were built. And then try to get as many information and as many tools you can get to discuss with your clients or offices, technical offices, or whatever you want. And I really agree that this is absolutely possible, and I hope the right way to go. I have no doubt at all.
There is, Carlo, there is a question for you in the discussion.
Yeah.
The question is from Anael, and it says, in the open building system, is the support imagined by standardization too, or only the infill?
The very, very last solution, even the support elements are more than standardized, are modular. So they are inside of some rules related to the dimension, proportion, and way of producing. But the question of the standard and the modular is a really fundamental question today, because robotic fabrication probably will erase the problem. So probably robotic fabrication will go further from the traditional question of prefabrication. They have to be standardized and modular. You can just change the software and obtain a different solution. This is exactly one of the main important line of investigation in what is the real meaning, which is the real difference between traditional tools and robotic machine. And this is the real question about robots. About robotic in architecture is not making strange things. Well, making strange things we can do anyway. The question is what we can do different from before. That's the point. And going beyond standard and modular probably is the most incredible new solution we are facing today. But it's a really interesting question.
Carlo, in the sense of this question and with links with robotics, you were saying that one of today's trends is replacement of human labor by technology, meaning all this robotics and offsite production, etc. Do you really think that this is the future, or maybe the energy problem will reduce in long term? Of course, not in Occidental countries nowadays, where we have still a lot of technology and still a lot of energy, but globally, don't you think that we are maybe switching to more handmade process in general? Meaning, for example, Camper, which is a design shoes company, they make, of course, mass production designs, but they're introducing a new line, which is individual shoes that they have repaired and they resell. You know, this question of maintenance, repairing, and transforming, which is every project is a single one. So we are slightly, I think, moving away from this kind of all-in-one, all adaptability, all mechanical, into turning to something that is much more artisanal, like Magda's explanation of how to reinvest these particular buildings. What do you think about these both trends, which are, they seem opposite, but they are coexisting? How can we deal with that? And do your questions about open systems are, how can we make them, how could I say that? How can we make them useful for any kind of building? You know, even your open modular systems are meant to work together with one kind of system. So how can we move these lines away from this one way of working?
Yeah, sure. Complex question, but anyway, great question. Now, the question, in my opinion, much more than the question of new open buildings, super sophisticated and high technology, the question is not, this is not the main question. The main question is to learn to read the buildings and learn to read the design process. And that is, if you are facing the situation of building a new building, an advanced new building, we can talk about all the advanced technology we can have. But if you are facing an existing building, the question is how to read and how to learn, how to understand which is the meaning of that building, which is the value of that building, and how it is built. Because always in a building there is a structure, always in a building there are installation, always in a building there are finishing, and which is the future of all these elements. being new or old. That's not the point. The point is it's about the logic. Reversibility is a question of culture. It's not a question of doing new, doing absolutely the best solution as possible. It's a question of culture. Then, in terms of innovation, because well, my topics in my investigation in the university are about innovation. But my topics in my general professional life are about exactly understanding how to give a new life or to continue the life of existing building or new buildings. There is not so much difference between existing and new. The question is about the logic. And I'm really working a lot in spreading the question of logic of processes, logic of intervention, instead of the great, fantastic result in the end. That is the most marvelous building in the world. And I'm quite happy, to be honest, that Lacaton Vassal won the Pritzker Prize, exactly because they design, for example, the tower in Paris, but even the School of Architecture in Nantes, but even the Palais de Tokyo refurbishment, and so on and so on. So they are winner prize, Pritzker, the most important prize in architecture in the world, and so on. But they work with completely different attitude depending on the situation. There was a new architectural school to build. Well, okay, really open building, super flexible space, super generous space that you can't give a name, and that's the point, to be enough courage to say, well, I can't give a name. You will say, you will use it, you will say, that's up to you. Start using it. It's the same when you fight with the offices in my city or with the client. Say, well, it's up to you, it's your house, it's not mine. Tell me what you want to do. I give you the opportunity to decide. So what's the problem? So talking about open architecture is about that is trying to get some more participation of all the people involved in the process, and most of all the users, because otherwise why we are doing architecture?
I had a question from Magda Maria, and I don't know if it's really a question, but maybe it's from a student perspective, but I feel like architectural reuse is not seen by the society and the politician maybe as a great architectural gesture as new buildings are. I don't know how to put it, but it's like I feel that architecture is often a demonstration of power, and then the reuse is not always used, and I don't know how to put it, but I don't know if it's a right perception or wrong one, but there is no reuse is not really put on the front of the scene, on the architectural scene at the international. And when a country builds or has a new program building, they want some new thing and to demonstrate what they can do, and they demonstrate with new and not in the architectural reuse that you introduced. I don't know, it's clear. It was for Magda Maria.
Sorry, I don't understand very well the question.
I think Magda, I think that what Sarah wants to say is that is the subject that sometimes architecture is seen like a powerful thing for the politicians. Yeah. And the reuse system, so it's more humil.
Yeah. See, I see. Thank you, Miquel. Yeah, Sarah. I think that the point 5 of the 5 strategy, the continuing is very clear, because when we start, we never start from zero. We start from the existing world, the existing buildings, the existing cities, the existing reality, and we re-habit ever. And the words of the Portuguese architect Fernando Távora were very small, because Távora say that that the architect is Távora explained that that the architect is like a chain of the buildings in which operate, and a good dose of humility that leads us to recognize that before us, others already work in these spaces, or moreover, that after us, others will continue to do so. Also, we are in the middle of the past and the future, and we build over the past, but over us, we build our future architects. And this humility lesson is very important, because we need show or analyze the reality, and the buildings are the reality with this point of view. And it's true that the power, the governments, etc., needed in the last century, 20th century, or use the architecture like a show power. But at the moment, I think that this is a sin. This use of the architecture of como una herramienta de poder,
a tool
of power.
I think we have a question from Aurel or Jan, peut-être.
Yes. Okay, so I wrote it up so I don't forget about it, like you said. And my question is for everybody that would like to answer. So here it is. Do you think that any building could be rehabilitated? Okay, I'll start again. Do you think any building could be rehabilitated, since reversibility is quite a new concept? What should we do with the building with no architectural value if it's poorly made? And on an ecological point of view, if it has no readaptative reuse notion incorporated in it from its initial creation, should we still even consider about reconversion or about renovation, since it's not interesting? So to sum it up, my question is, to what extent should we push the concept of all this? I don't know if it's clear.
Yeah, and your question has like two parts, right?
Yeah, yes, it does.
So the last part is, to what extent should we force this logic?
Yes.
When can we just say, okay, there's no worth in trying to adapt? And the first part.
Do you think that any building could be rehabbed? And if there's no architectural value, because it's not, because the concept of reuse is also to be kind of ecological and thoughtful of the nature, and not consume all of the product that it offers us.
Well, I have my point of view, but maybe Carlo or Magda can share theirs first.
Magda, do you want to start?
Sorry. And when I understand the question, Aurel, we find that all the buildings must rest, all the buildings, not only the heritage buildings, because the destruction of structural buildings is a crime for the world. And any building, when you analyze your conditions, your structural system, your morphologic spaces, its morphologic spaces, its materials, its environment conditions, its atmosphere, etc. Ever you can find a function that could conciliate with this building, ever. And why destruct them? Why destruct it? Any building is a reserve of space of our society, is a reserve of land, is a reserve of cities tissue. Is very important for us that heritage is all. Heritage is all. It's if it's possible to conserve.
But to answer this also is, since like you say, since money is all in this world, when it gets too expensive, what's the point of view we should have on a building that would cost too much, then just destroy and redo? Since cost is always the #1 question in a lot of the minds of people today, how can we counteract this way of thinking?
See, the economics reason is the argument that the people ever argue. Why the new buildings are so expensive that repair the old buildings, but with another strategies, we can conserve these structures and don't spend much money. But we must change the tools, the normative. It's true that when we have a ruin, a building that is ruined, it's very difficult to rebuild or to rehabilitating, but there are a lot of imagination possibilities. Carlo explained in the first lesson, very, very interesting, this inventing open stories. We can inventing open inhabiting forms to rehabilitate these spaces, include the ruins. I have beautiful examples of art history of ruins that its interiors are inhabited or were inhabited century in 16th centuries, 17th centuries, etc. All is possible with imagination, all is possible with strategies, good strategies, all is possible without too normatives and too much normatives, too much conditions, too much economic interestings, etc. We must try. We must try.
In the same way that it was saying Magda Aurel, in fact, the excuse of economical cost is the excuse to demolish and to do no, because the economical context and the economical apparatus wants to construct, because they want to mobilize capital. You know what I mean? So I think that the reflection that we have to have as architects, as actors of the construction, is that the ecological cost could enter in the addition. So it's because of that it's necessary to talk about that. That is the first thing. And the second thing, when you say that it's difficult to reuse this building because it's not adapted, it's because of the heritage of modern ideology, that we have to have a fitted building. You know what I mean? So yes. Maybe what we can to explain, and it's a labor that architects we have to do to our clients, is to explain that maybe we can adapt the use, and because the ecological cost of demolish a building, it's higher, and now we can do that. So we have maybe to explain that I don't know, that a glass room could be with the little different dimensions that we do habitually. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's a mentality change that we have to explain to everybody, because it's very important, the ecological issue that we have in this moment.
But to join the debate, I think what Jan is talking about is very true and very accurate. Carlo was saying it's very, very difficult to explain everybody and to get people to be convinced about this, because market pressure is huge. Magda was saying, and she's right, there are lots of abandoned spaces, and there's a lot of people looking for a place to live. But it's paradoxical, because in small towns, in medium towns, or in suburbs where square meters are less expensive, this allows you with the flexibility, saying it could be abandoned anyway, so why not trying this, even if we are not very optimized. But when you are in prime locations, like in the center of Barcelona, in the center of Paris, this is very, very difficult to keep, because market pressure is just huge. So I think that if we want to fight these problems in the long term, we need to convince our politicians to make regulations about forbidding this destruction. I think we cannot just trust the faith and the market to go the right direction. We will need regulations. And then we need like not only our clients as promoters, but we need like mass media communication to mass people, because most people are not ready to change their product of housing product, meaning they want their 2 rooms, their 1 kitchen, and their 2 bathrooms. And if it's only 1 bathroom, but it's bigger, they don't want it. So we need to explain what are the advantages we can provide with. And we need also to explain that we will give other extra a bonus to these people, meaning you don't have that, but look, as St. Geronimus, you will have like a small cabinet, but look at the bigger space you have. Maybe it's not very comfortable to heat all these in winter, but you can use it in spring, right? I think we really need to show the bonuses. Otherwise, it's impossible. I don't know what you think about that, everyone. Open question.
But I would just want to point out a question that is, there is a common way of thinking that is absolutely not true. That is, restoring is much more expensive than new. If you make experiences, it depends in what does it mean restoring. But if the idea is to do the less as possible in order to turn the building better than before, not necessarily the best possible, but better than before, probably the money will be less than building a new one. And I experimented this situation exactly with the two works I developed in Switzerland, because one was the administration of our university. That is a very ancient building. The idea was, well, we can't use it because it's very cold in winter and so on and so on. And it's a monument and so on. So it's a very, very specific situation. But our proposal was exactly to say, well, let's define with a prototype, and we did a prototype. They paid us for the top prototype, and we demonstrated that spending few money, it was possible to implement a really better situation in thermal comfort. We only left open 5 days in 1 year during the end of January, because we made all the energetic scenarios, studies, very Swiss way of thinking and working. But in the end, the result is doing few things is possible to improve absolutely a lot than existing situation. And this is real. I mean, I can show you the data. So it's not a fantasy or a dream. And the administration, because the building is public, okay, the administration at the beginning said, well, move to another building, because if you don't like to use this building, move to another. So the university said, okay, let's build a new administration. And we said, wait a moment, let's think about the existing building, how to keep people there, because it's even a memory for us. It's a symbol. It's really symbolic for us, that kind of building in Mendrisio and in general. And it's a very important monument in Ticino. So in the end, we said, okay, but we can demo. We did it. We show it. We made exactly the counts, really, franc by franc, Swiss franc by Swiss franc, saying, well, what is really necessary and what is not. And in the end, it was accepted. And now it's going on the construction. So it's not always real. What you were saying as common feeling is a real common feeling. Absolutely, you are completely right. But it is not always true. A question of our capability in terms of techniques. We are technicians. We are many things. We are architects and so on. But we have to be able to find, to discover, to use the right tool for the specific problem. In this case, the question is, which is the real question? So First of all, learning making questions. First of all, learning reading the situation. Second, making right questions. Third, finding the right answer or the best answer as possible. And this is exactly an architectural work. This is exactly an architectural work, because architects are coordinating all the possible specialities in the world in order to, in this case, for example, doing as less as possible, but really as less as possible, as cheap as possible, in order to obtain the best as possible, but not the best absolute, the intermediate, the best possible. This is, in my opinion, the incredible work we have we can do today. We are asked by the society to do today in our reality, in our context, because the world is really large, but in our, let's say, in our region, because, well, the world is really complex, really different. Emerging countries are facing other kinds of problems. But in our general situation, this is one question.
But what you're saying is very relevant, because you made the administration accept this instead of this.
Yep.
But
in Switzerland,
don't you think that this is the problem, and this is what we need to change? That people in the whole world accept to have less for more, because we always want the best thing, like the new iPhone, the new thing, the best of the best of the best, and maybe this is the essence of the problem, is that everybody wants more, but it's not efficient.
The question is why you are asking the best situation. I mean, you really need it. For example, the question we asked to people working in our administration was, which is exactly the problem? And they said, well, okay, in the reality, in summer, this is a marvelous place where to work. Okay, so summer is okay. In spring, oh, it's okay, it's great because it's fresh and so on and so on. Okay, spring is okay. In autumn, well, okay, some humidity, but in general, we like to live here. Okay, so what's the problem? Winter. Okay, winter. So 4 months instead of 12. Now, in these 4 months, which is exactly the problem? Well, okay, in winter, but in winter, there are Christmas holidays, there are this, there are that, and so on. So in the reality, which is the period when people can't work here? And they said, well, generally, after Christmas, we really don't like to come back and working in these offices. And we said, well, okay, so after Christmas, it's just 1 month. And so inside of this month, which is the problem? So we made all the super sophisticated analysis in terms of energy. So I can tell you dynamic analysis, BIM process, software, so all this kind of stuff we did and everything like a NASA building, a NASA space shuttle, but in the reality for an ancient monument, just to defining that first, it was real. The January was the problem. Yeah, it's true, but it's not December and it's not February, it's January. And it's around 28, 25 days where there is the problem. In these 25 days, there are some holidays for Christmas holidays. So not 25, but 18. And in this 18, what we really need to do to solve an 18 problem and not 365 day problem. So when we focused that it was an 18-day problem, we said, okay, great. We study, we develop a prototype, we make all the technical instruments inside to testing, which is the best solution, and we try to solve it. We solve it for 15 days more. We left 3 days. And for those 3 days, people are at the moment are joking about the topic. They said, you remember, this is the very small problem inside the real situation. So this is a question of approach, you know, to going, well, okay, you have to respect the problem. If they told me, they told us, because I was not alone, I was me and some other people inside of my chair, the chair where I work, discussed what's the problem. And then, well, there was a meeting, and in this meeting, they said to me, well, okay, we have exactly this question. And I said, well, okay, now we start working, we start defining the problem, we start to give a quantity of the problem, which is the real quantity of the problem. Because it's even a question of quantity. Quantity is not only money. Quantity is an example, the day of a cold situation in a room. It's a quantity. 25 days, okay, problem, 25 days. But which is exactly the meaning of day by day in 25-day problem. So this is our way of facing the reality, you know. Otherwise, somebody would say, well, okay, move, build another building, a new building, spend probably 20 million francs, and everyone is happy. But what to do with the ancient building? Because it's a monument. So we can't destroy, we can't abandon. So it was really a stupid solution everywhere. So we just said, well, okay, we try to find a non-stupid solution inside a real problem. That's it.
So the solution is decomposing the problem and taking the time to explain it. That's the solution.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
The solution is decomposing the problem.
Yeah, it's like in very, very, very complex mathematical problems. Mm. You have to divide the problem and try to solve it step by step the situation, as always in the life.
Very interesting.
Yeah, in this particular case, of course.
Yeah, sure. We are talking about a monument. We are talking about, we were absolutely known well who were the user, which were the problems of the users. We had some money from the municipality, because the owner is the municipality, to realize our prototype. And through this prototype, we demonstrate that it was absolutely simple and much less expensive, absolutely much less expensive, the intervention we were proposing. And with the same money, we are restoring even the building as a monument instead of building a new one.
But I think this is the response for this project in particular. But to respond to Jan's question, I think that usually there are two strategies that are very powerful in life as an architect. Is one, decomposing the problem in different problems. So that is one thing, but the other one is showing another different approach than what is expected. If you confront what they are saying to you as a block, and this is that way, that is their reality of the client, the municipality, whoever, it's very difficult to find that. If you decompose, or if you change the point of view with something unexpected, it's usually much more effective than trying to... Sorry, NGDRD we're talking, I don't know who is it. So if you change the way of looking at the question and you propose other things than expected, it's usually a good way of being able to propose other things. If you keep in their framework, you're never going to convince them.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. I perfectly agree with you. Yep. Absolutely. But that's the point of open histories. I mean, it's not true that the history has always the same preview, solution, and end. Who knows? Nobody. Nobody at all. For example, I know quite well Fernando Távora. He was really a master, a Portuguese architect, and a really great man and great thinker. And well, he was really telling the story that Magda was saying. I mean, Fernando Távora was a very, very smart but easy guy who was telling stories about the history of building And through telling the history of building, he was telling about how it was built, for example, the reasons why it was built, and the reasons why it was not reasonable to demolish, for example, that part of the building. But the question is always the same. We have to understand what is around us. It's absolutely important. We have to learn how to read, how to understand, how to criticize, to be honest with yourself and say your opinion on what is around you. That's really the question.
I have a question. Is there
I lost the...
Anael, we are not able to listen to you. Maybe you have a bad connection. Could you post it by...
Yeah, sorry. Maybe it's better now.
Yeah, perfect. Go.
Okay. Is there a country where the normative and the laws are better or better? Like, do they allow more flexibility to the builders or to the architects? Is there a country that we can look after right now or not? Is it like all is it to build?
If I may say my opinion, rules are an opportunity instead of a problem. I mean, once more, learn to read rules. In my opinion, it's not exactly a question of, oh my God, I would be a very, very famous and great architect if rules were different. Well, you have no chance. You have absolutely no chance in your life. The question is, which are the rules? Criticize the rules, try, work to change the rules. Obviously, yeah, obviously, yes. But now, today, what to do? Study the rules, understand the rules. I had a meeting with the Office of Monument in Switzerland, and you imagine the situation. Well, 10 guys saying it was impossible to do what we were proposing, and me trying to explain that it was possible if we made some investigation and so on. I had a meeting in my life for designing a stadium. And exactly in the same situation, there were all the UEFA in front of me saying, well, it is impossible to do. And because the rules of UEFA. UEFA says a stadium is a circular building, very closed, and so on and so on. And I was saying, well, listen, you gave me all the rules. Okay, I read really all the rules, a book like this. And I respecting all the rules. I really challenge you in saying what I'm not respecting. Beside this question, I want to do this proposal and not that proposal. So the question is a question of rules, or is a question of what you are proposing and how and why? And in my opinion, working as an architect is defining once more which are the right questions, and this is the most complex part of our work, and then trying as best as you can to define the best solution, the best answer to this question. But it's working in emerging countries. I was working in emerging countries for a few years in my life when I was really young. And there the problem obviously was not monument, was not streets. There were not streets. There were not anything we know in our cities. It doesn't exist. So the question there was, well, which is the pipe for infrastructure and how to, this was the question. The solution was to draw, to explain the infrastructure in order to be possible, to realize the quarter, the city, the housing space. So there is always a completely different answer, comparing to where you are, which are the rules, which is the problem, how many monies you have, and so on and so on. And it means that if I have a client Rolex, maybe I can spend much more instead of developing countries. What maybe, Who knows? There are no certain questions. There are no there are no rules in the reality. I mean, there are some reasons why you are doing your activities.
I think Magda was pointing to some cities that were proposing ways to avoid some kind of norms, or to make them a bit softer for recuperation projects. Was I right?
Yes. In País Vasco, in north of Spain, there are cities that are changed the tools of the I see living buildings, but I will see respect and answer, Anna Maria, that you have say that respect the city centers, the big cities, that the price of the quarter meter is very expensive. We are now in a very delicate moment, in a very tragic moment with the pandemic, COVID-19, but this pandemic has changed this situation. It's very, very interesting. I don't know in French, but in Spain and most specifically in Catalonia, in Barcelona, there are a lot of families that have changed their living and have moved to the country, to the yes, and have and the children go to the country schools, to the rural areas, to the agricultural areas, and have left the city center, and have spent money to new houses, and re-equilibrate the population of the country. For me, is very exciting. Is absolute different that the prevision of in 2050 the 80% of the people of the world live in big cities. The pandemic has changed, and has changed a lot of things. For instance, the modus, if the families use the house with the pandemic converted in an office, in a school, in a gym, in a hall of dance, in a lot of activities that we never dream. And this change of mentality, change of mind with the pandemic is very, very exciting because the architectural space, the architectural limits, the limits of the houses, of the equipment, of the land, of the cities are absolutely changed. And maybe for better, for re-equilibrate or rebalance the difference.
That's one of the aims of our project course. We were trying to think how can reusing buildings that are not meant to be for housing use, plus COVID and the changes of COVID can make a big match and help us do things differently, like changing some kind of facilities for more space, like changing to outer space. We absolutely know that we need outside space right now. It was less important 2 years ago. Nowadays, we cannot imagine not having new housing with exterior space. But as you say, it's very exciting and it extends to a lot of questions, not only cities and countryside, but even the way to live the housing. For example, when rooms become an office and children's room becomes parents' offices and parents' room can become a playground, and then your cupboards and your clothes can no longer stay in this room because you need to be able to work all day, and maybe your son needs to take a jean or something from his closet. So everything gets changed, and I think that this is really an opportunity, as you were saying.
I perfectly agree with you, and the same trend that is happening in Catalonia is happening in Italy too. So many people are moving from the city to countryside to very small village. Italy is full of very incredible small villages, and many people are going to live there. And but it's quite interesting because, for example, Giancarlo De Carlo, that is a quite interesting architect, Italian architect, proposed such kind of things 30 years ago, so absolutely before COVID, for a very, very small village in Liguria, next to Genova. And once more, it's a question of thinking about architecture. It's a question of pushing new ideas and new proposals in order to understand better what does it mean living today in for example, in a modern country. But modern country probably doesn't mean exactly to live in the center of Milan. Maybe yes, maybe no. It's one more choice we are giving to people to live in good condition.
I don't know how it is in Spain or in Italy, but in France, what we are seeing is that it is the high class people that are moving. That it's not like the common people, the middle class that have poor living areas in Paris that are moving. And such, most of the people that are living are people that have or that already have a house in the little village and little places. So of course it seems as an opportunity, but will it lead the big capital to be void of those? Will those big apartments will be void and just become Airbnbs, like full time, and provide to those people that are living in those best houses in the countryside? And will is it a real opportunity, or will it just lead to those? I don't know how to say it. Of course, of course, it can become opportunities, but I fear that it may become just another transformation toward a more capitalistic and more capitalistic use of buildings in Paris or in Italy, that we won't use those opportunities as we should for the best of everyone.
Well, there is never an only way of going things. So maybe there is even a capitalistic way because somebody understood that there is some business in that direction. But what is happening in Italy is different. Is exactly what we are saying. So very rich people decide to move for the pandemic period in countryside in super marvelous places. One option. But there is even another very interesting option that is very, very poor areas in the country are selling to €1, only €1, old houses, totally abandoned, and nobody knows who is the owner. So the fundamental question is, nobody knows who is the owner. And these very small villages are selling for €1, but the compromise is that you have to move there and live there at least 10 years. If you do it, they pay 50% of the cost of the restoration, obviously the basic works you need and nothing marvelous, but anyway, this 50%, And the compromise is you have to live there. You really have to move there and be there. This is something that is happening, and it's most in Sicily and southern regions, but works quite well. It's really happening and going on.
Do you have any more questions? I think the debate is very rich, and we are very happy to be together. But it's a little bit late. If you have the last question, maybe before closing the course.
Yes. I've got the last question. It's an open question, but in my opinion, if we want to reuse a building, or if we want to practice that way and not build only new buildings, to have a better look, to have an accurate way to practice architecture, we must have more experience and more practice of the construction. In my opinion, we must have more. We must have more skills, and how can we change that? How can we change maybe the architecture formation or the architecture code to maybe put a little bit more of visits, or I don't know how to turn that, but there's a difference between the reuse and rehabilitations and the architecture formation who formed the students to build and design new buildings, and not to reuse the ones who have been there all this time.
Yes, here in Polytechnic University, there are two schools, the School of Barcelona and the schools of Vallès. I am in two schools, and there are different ways. The School of Barcelona is very academic, and the School of Vallès is very strategic, very sustainability. And I think like teacher, like professor, that the architectural students must know both ways. In first time, they must learn the form systems, the spatial systems, the construct systems, the magic world of the form and the space. They must dominate this language, but they too must learn how operate over the reality. The reality over the pre-existence. The pre-existence must be a land, a solar. The pre-existence must be a existent building. The students must learn strategic of reuse or rebuild, but build ex novo too, because in some occasions you must do an answer to a problem, like the like Marco say, with with his Cartesian mind, you must first analyze and after propose, but first analyze. There are Sanskrit phrase that say first attention and then propose. Attention and intention. First attention and then intention. This is the two parts of the architectural design. Heard the reality, observe the reality, observe the existence, and then propose, and then intention with the project in one direction. But for me, now the direction is the reuse. It's clear. It's clear. But we need this language because we are architects, and our specific field is the form and the space and the construction. And with these arms, we can change. We can change the reality.
In my opinion, you have to keep the patience to learn. I mean, I perfectly understand what you are saying. Maybe any one of us at a certain point in his study period said, well, okay, now it's enough, I want to do, because I losing my time and so on and so on. But in the reality, just imagine this question, this aspect. How do we recognize modern movement heritage if we don't understand and know modern movement architecture? And modern movement architecture, to learn modern movement architecture means to study, to read, to feel, to visit. For example, it's fundamental in the study period to go to visit architecture, to taste architecture, to verify what is a real proportion in things, in material, the taste of material, the temperature of material. And this is the incredible opportunity you have during the study period, much more than in professional period, because in professional period, time is full of thousands and thousands of other, everybody is laughing. It's really a crazy situation doing architecture. But anyway, you have to gain your own opinion and your own baggage of culture related to what you will do that you don't know, but to have some tools to work as an architect. So in relation to spend time in studying architecture, in my opinion, I'm really convinced that it's fundamental to do it in a very specific and serious way. It's as serious to study as to design and build architecture. But it's really difficult to, for example, it's really difficult, for example, to focus a real problem inside of a complex architectural reality. The way of doing it, for example, the question opened by Magda, that everything is heritage, is an incredible question. It's a super large and open discussion. And I have not, unfortunately, I have not a so clear answer as Magda Maria has, but I may be in the same direction, but I'm not so radical at the moment, at least. But I'm absolutely sure that we need to reuse as much as possible. Probably not everything, but as much as possible. But the question is what and how, and to learn what and how and why There's always a why. There is always a question behind our way of doing. That's it. And you will go on studying for the rest of your life. Remember it. That's absolutely fundamental. There is not the student period and professional period, professor period, or whatever, for the serious guys, or not for everybody. But for serious guy, there is no distinction. Well, I'm still studying, Magda Maria is still studying, Miquel, Maria are absolutely still studying. They are trying to discover through these meetings too, something more, something new, something different. We are creating our opinion, discussing. We enjoy our work, obviously.
Yeah, I think very, very interesting things were said. This question of having the patience to study, the passion also to look for new solutions, to push forward any question, to listen to other approaches, to integrate them, to try and fail, to try and succeed. And Magda said something very, very interesting also. She was saying like form, space, construction are our tools. So we must work on them and approach any problem with those tools. So those tools are in all teaching process in our school. But if you think that these questions of reusing, of making more adaptable, of weighing, of trying to work otherwise are interesting and should be pushed, one easy way further than what Carlo and Magda said is just pick up this particular course. By picking up the course we're doing together, we're having a number of students, and believe me, teachers look at this. Teachers look at which courses are picked and which themes are most looked by students. It's like an offer and demand in a small market at school. So it seems ridiculous, but just by picking this course and working on it, you are improving your skills and you're saying to the community of the school, this is what interests me in any case, you know? And this is transforming also because I propose this as a new teaching connected to the colloque that was organized in Rennes and works with Carlo, Magda. And you know, we're moving, everybody's moving at the same time. So move with us. Let's move together.
Great.
Okay. I think it's time to close the debate. Magda and Carlo, if you can wait 5 minutes, we discuss. So thank you very much to Magda and Carlo. I hope that for you it's a very clear lesson that they made. I agree about what Magda, Carlo, and Anna Maria says about this new, not new, but this new way that we have to improve in the architectural school about reuse things. You know, also the Rennes students that we started this year in the first semester with the optional of Habitar, and this semester is the first time in the architecture engineer course that we propose a project that is not a new construction. So, and I think that you see that it mobilized new ways of doing project. And it's very important to try that, but it's very important what Magda says and Anna Maria says also, that our tools are form, space, and construction, and you have to control these tools. Thank you very much.